Let's Talk podcast for Ohio Young Adults is brought to you by the Ohio Ministry Network, where you can find us on Spotify or YouTube and check us out for more resources about young adult ministries across the state of Ohio. Alrighty. Well, hey, we are here in episode 2 of Let's Talk podcast of Ohio Young Adults. I'm here with Garret May from Bethel Christian Church and BCC.
Yeah,
so
BCC.
Welcome, man.
Thank
you.
Yeah,
Welcome for coming into the studio, doing this thing in person. It's always, I think it's a lot better doing things like this in person than over Zoom and stuff. But I understand sometimes we have to do that, just because of distance and stuff. But welcome, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's gonna be good, man. We're excited. We're really, our heart here at the podcast really is to help resource young adult leaders, people who are doing the ministry, young adults that are a part of ministry or serving in a ministry, geared towards that generation, geared towards that demographic, because, well, it's such a broad demographic, as you know. And I think it's just great for us as young adult leaders to hear other people doing it around the state. What are they doing? How are they doing it? It's their perspectives. And it just kind of creates a culture of hearing each other's hearts and our passions that have been laid on it from God to really pour it into this demographic. So I think it's really cool for us to do this. And so Garret, so I want to first get into of knowing, who you are and a little bit of your journey. And I'm sure other people who are viewing this too want to know is some of your journey in life, some of your background, what got you into ministry, things like that, if you will. And so feel free to share whatever you want to share within that topic. Yeah,
absolutely. So, I mean, I was very blessed and fortunate in the fact that I was raised in a Christian household. I'm very, very thankful for that. My parents started going to church when I was 6 months old.
Okay.
I attended that same church until I was 19 when I was hired as a youth pastor.
Yeah.
So I grew up in the church, super, super blessed. My dad, he was an incredible role model for me and just modeled the faith. But I kind of got stuck in the trap of, just the growing up in church, but not really making it your own.
Yeah. Okay.
Which can be tricky.
Yeah.
Right. It can be hard. And I think we can see some people fall into that at times. But about sophomore, junior year of high school, I really started to make my faith my own. I decided to go on a missions trip to Northern Ireland. So it was actually the first time I've ever been on a plane going to Northern Ireland. So it was quite the flight.
Yeah.
But on that trip, it was incredible. We had a prophetic word night on the very first night. And someone just spoke into my life so clearly that I had a calling and a passion and just a burning desire to see the younger generation come to know Christ.
Yeah.
And throughout that week, going into it, my youth pastor, he had spoke, leadership qualities over my life that I didn't see.
Wow.
But they were kind of revealed throughout that week. But I didn't think I was good enough. So the first thing I thought of was, who am I to do that? Just like Moses, who am I to be a youth pastor and to do that? So I kind of ran from the calling. Then 2 years later, I was at Ohio Youth Ministry Summer Camp, and God recalled me into ministry throughout that week, just tugging on my heart. And the super cool thing is my wife was called into youth ministry that same exact week. So God kind of placed that calling on her heart. So we get home from camp and she texts me and says, we need to talk, which of course, when you're dating, that's usually not a good sign.
Yeah, not at all.
Not good. But she was like, I think God's calling us to go be youth pastors and young adult pastors. So I mean, ever since then, we've just been running after it. So I was hired my first position at 19, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So fast forward now, almost 4 years into ministry.
Ooh, come on.
It's been incredible.
Yeah.
Love it.
Dude, that is awesome. Like it's just neat. I'm similar to you in the sense that, I grew up in the church and, a young age, all that stuff, served, all the time in all kinds of different ministries, growing up, and then, and a similar kind of deal. And so I love that, those moments, right? Those kind of mountaintop moments, the burning bush moments that we kind of have, like you likened yourself to kind of Moses in the sense of just kind of like, kind of ran away from it, kind of, not sure about it going down that road, but then you had those moments where, like at camps or retreats or, in your case too, also the missions trip and be on the mission field, there's something about that when you step out kind of your comfort zone, get away from things and kind of the monotony of life and the distractions. And it just like, it gives that moment and that chance for, I think, us to really quiet ourselves down enough, because like God's always talking. It's just like we have to tune into his station. And I think that that's like a big part of that, of like, there's just so much. And I think there's been no other really period of time that really, as humanity, that we've really been faced with that. I mean, because like, you go back a couple hundred years, there was no radio, no TV. There was, I think the only media really was just books and like newspapers and stuff like that. But for the most part, people were really kind of not as much connected in that sense, other than outside their local community and families and church and stuff. So I think it's like quite interesting that this is the first time kind of the human experiment of like, we got social media, all these things hitting us all the time, 24/7, and how that really affects us. And I think it makes it that much more harder to really get away from the distractions of life, and do that, because I found that in my own life, like just kind of that stuff as well, that when I got away at like, camps, especially missions trips, stuff like that, where pushing beyond, my own physical limitations or things that I could rely on and stuff, and then just having to rely on God, on those mission fields sometimes, you eat the wrong thing, it's and it affects you the wrong way, or you drink the water and you shouldn't, all that stuff in some mission trips, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh man, I'm really relying on there because I've come to the end of myself. And I really need you. And we live kind of in this bubble in America, especially, where we don't really ever have to come to the end of ourselves. There's always a comfort escape hatch. There's always a way to distract ourselves. And so that's amazing. So when you were in Ireland and doing all that over there, were there some things that really stood out to you in your walk? Because you kind of grew up and you said like it kind of had me kind of make it my own, which is such a key factor. Would you say that was kind of the time period you kind of made your own?
Yeah, it just lit a fire in me. You know, just not only the leadership qualities that God revealed to me, that, my youth pastor had been speaking over me, but also just the relationship with God was just ignited like never before. And it was just, for the first time, real. It wasn't just what I've heard, but it was, what am I experiencing? So it changed everything. The second day of the missions trip, the missionaries, we were doing this large soccer camp. And I love soccer. I grew up playing soccer, and we're doing this large soccer camp. And in our group, there's about 50 to 60 kids.
Okay.
And day two, the missionary, he was the lead for our group. And he came to me and he said, Garret, you're leading today. I have a rash around my ankles. So you're leading the team. You're leading the kids. Go for it.
Yeah.
So, just kind of threw me in. But through that, I was able to see, not only hearing I'm called to it, but seeing that I'm called to it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. There is that thing where I love that point where you were really harping into there, because we all have to walk through this, right? Especially those that have grown up in the church. It's so very important. Be raised in a good Christian home. Yeah, you're plugged in a church, all that stuff. Yeah. But there is this thing that never gets taken away from you. You still have to own this decision. Absolutely. I'm following him. And time kind of leads you there. And that's where, like, young adult ministry, we're kind of led in this place where that's the crux of the moment right there, where, youth and everything else below has been a lot of wind backing from your parents, from maybe how you were raised, a lot of those things that are helping you move along. But then when you hit young adult, you really have to make this your own, because you're in different situations. You're either moved out, you're in a college dorm, you're away, or even like, okay, I don't really have these other pressures. I kind of can make these decisions. And you're transitioning to that adulthood. And so for me, I think like that's so imperative. And so you could totally see how God was using these trips of you being obedient, and you being faithful, there, but like did not know what God had in store for you over there overseas. And all of a sudden it was like this moment where it's that, okay, I'm making this my own. I'm stepping into it. And that was like myself when my first missions trip is I was in Peru at 17, and we were down there. We were transitioning from high school going over into the college age. And I remember like being over there, and it was, for me, it was a lot of push to the limit. Just because I ended up brushing my teeth, right, with rinsing my toothbrush with their water.
Oh no.
And that was enough. That was enough to give me, we used to call it the big C and the big D, all right? And so those are bowel movement extremes, for those of you who are wondering. And I remember, so we called it the big C, and you would have both at the same time, which was interesting. So we were like, I remember just like, oh man, I'm in this right now, and we're doing it. And I remember though, we were at this church, and there was this thing that happened. It was really sad actually, but it was just, God used this whole kind of moment in a sense where this guy got saved on the streets. We were doing street evangelism, and the guy got saved, and then the church there, we were trying to plug them in. We were working with a local church to get you plugged in there. And when we took him to the local church, some of the leaders there, they were like, "Nah, we don't want him." And I was like, "Oh, what now?"
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? And they're like, "Oh yeah, we don't want him. He's too bad. He's, gangster, this and that. We don't want him a part of our church. We don't want, he's really bad." And I'm like, "Oh man." And I remember the way how I was kind of more like happy-go-lucky around that age, where I was just like, I didn't understand, but that hit me so hard. Like I was like, man, and I could not shake this feeling. It was this thing that really just irked me, and just really like, man, what is wrong with this picture? And I remember it just kept stirring in me. It was like a fire in my bones. Like I was just like, man. And I remember we were having a meeting before ministering at this church that night. And I remember I walked up to the youth pastor at the time, and I said, "Hey," I said, you need to tell the people that they need to stop relying on foreign missionaries to come over here. And then when we come over here, and then people get won over because the Holy Spirit does his work, and then all of a sudden then you shut them away. Yeah. I was like, that's a no-go. I was just very but bold, and it came out of nowhere, and it wasn't me. It was more than me.
Yeah.
And I didn't recognize or know what that was, but I remember I told him that, and then he was just like, okay. Actually, and our lead pastor was there because his daughter was on the trip too. And so I remember he was there, and then they start talking, and they come up to me and like, "Okay, so here's the new plan. Dan, you're going to speak tonight. I've never preached a message before in my life at this point." And he's like, "You're going to speak tonight to this church, share the message, and then and so we're gonna do that." And I was like, "Oh no!" I said, "You guys are the pastors. That's your job." And he was like, "No, you're gonna do it." And I was like, "Okay." And I remember I stood up on the stage. It's this church. We're in the middle of like the street, and it was just like this door open from a building that was like their stage, and then all these pews were just in the street. And I remember like I was standing there, and I was like, "Okay," and I stood up and I just started speaking, and literally within like the first sentence that I kind of was sharing, all of a sudden it was like I blacked out, but not like passed out, blacked out. I just kind of, last thing I remember was just like hearing my voice ring through the streets over like the PA system. Wow. And I was like, man, what was that? And I look around like, man, I totally botched that. Like I just said like a sentence, and then like I don't know. I get down, and my whole team was like, "That was amazing."
That's
and I was
awesome.
like,
That's
like,
so
what?
good.
They're like, "You preached for a whole half hour." And I was like, okay, that definitely wasn't me, but okay. And here I think that my leaders, the reason why they had me do it is because I think they were testing to see, is this just emotion, or is this actually the Lord speaking through him, and it's on his heart? And so we're gonna put it to the test and see. And so the fruit of it was that it was the Lord. And then the rest of that trip, I got to speak at every church we were at, and just getting words for the church, and just speaking to them on that regard, and seeing what the Lord had. And I've never preached before in my life, so that trip for me, like your trip to Northern Ireland, was this thing where it really impacted me, and saw like, okay, maybe there's something going on here. Maybe God's calling me to something. Yeah. And so that was the beginning of an awesome journey with that, of making it my own, of really experiencing God in that way, where it's like I can't run to the comforts. I can't run to the distractions when I feel like whatever uncomfortable, or I feel tired, or I feel whatever. Like, you're in it, and there's something about that. So I think that's amazing, man. So thank you so much for sharing, kind of that journey of making it your own, and your experiences of feeling called into the ministry. and how wonderful too. Like you and your girlfriend at the time
Yep.
got called at that point, and
Yeah.
it's like because sometimes people get called and the other people they're like not
It's
into
true.
it, you know.
Yeah.
So this was
Yeah.
that was a huge blessing, and so a question I want to ask you within the ministry realm is so with young adults in particularly. I know you do both young adults and
Yeah.
youth, but what's like kind of your passion for young adults specifically, and just kind of what you see for that demographic?
Yeah. Yeah, really the place is give them a place of community. You know, the passion for young adults, it kind of stems from youth ministry. I heard this statistic once, I can't remember where from,
Sure.
but that 66% of youth students after they graduate stop attending church. You know, and that statistic just burdened me.
Yeah.
To the point that anytime I journal in the morning, I write 66% in the journal, right? Because it just burdens me so heavily.
Yeah.
And with that burden, it kind of flowed into young adult ministry of what do I need to do, right? What does God want me to do to give them a place of community? And one thing that I see with young adults specifically is they don't really care what they're doing. They just want to do it together, and they just want to have a group.
Yeah.
You know, we oftentimes after our Bible studies and our services, we go out to Applebee's every
yes.
single time. I mean, half price apps, you can't beat it.
Can't beat
Can't
that.
beat it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we always go out to Applebee's, and then we're just seeing more and more. They're like, well, what's next? What else are we doing?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at my watch. You know, I've got 2 kids, and I'm like, it's 9:30.
Yeah.
Like I'm ready to go home. What do you mean? What's next?
Yeah.
But you know, it's 9:30, 9:45, and we're just 15 young adults walking through Target just because they want to.
Yeah.
They just want to be around each other.
Right.
So they're just so hungry for community, and they're just so hungry for God's word. You know, I'm seeing just a shift of they're not just looking to come hang out and that's it, but you know they want Christian community that will hold them accountable.
Yeah.
And that will speak life into them. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
That's cool, man. Because like I think you hit a big point there of just walking out this faith together and creating a space where it's like I feel like young adults, right? Our heart isn't that we want to be so cut off from other demographics within the church. It's not like we're like anti, you know, middle-aged or anti, you know, whatever. But I think there's a time where it's nice to be though around people that are in a similar season as you. That are dealing with similar things because it's different, you know, because it's just like when you have young families that have young kids, it's like, well, you being hanging around with them, well, there's a lot you can connect on now because it's like, well, yeah, the same struggles, the same kind of things that are concerning to you. We're talking with other parents that are raising kids at this point, at these stages, you know, what's out there and what's the best advice and this and that, right? Well, this is kind of like with young adult ministry. It's like, well, I'm making a lot of huge decisions, and I'm not only am I having a nice shepherd there that's with me in this ministry that has kind of went through that season already, but also like I have these peers that are making these decisions, and some are coming to conclusions on certain things that I still have yet to, but I get to hear and glean from like how they walk through it and how God, you know, walked them through those seasons. And I think that's so valuable because we're never meant to walk this thing out alone.
Yeah.
There's no lone wolves in the kingdom.
So true.
It's just, and if you do that, it just makes it 10 times harder. And so we're not called to be the hermits or this or that or be the loners, but we're called to walk this out together as a family. And it reminds me of even like the Great Commission, right? It's like go make disciples. And in the Greek there, when you're studying it, the go isn't really the major emphasis. It's really the make is the big emphasis. But like make disciples isn't necessarily the we think sometimes, I think especially from kind of our upbringing as far as being more Western culture in the sense of like we think classroom, we think instructional kind of thing, but really from more of an Eastern standpoint, it was like, no, go make disciples. And how you make disciples is like, you need to like live with them, you know, walk with them in the streets and the markets and go, you know, in Targets and, you know, to the Applebee's and to this and like doing that together and living out, shining your light and seeing how you live and as you being the young adults pastor and how you live and how you walk through and the way how you are with your family and the stuff that you are, that stuff is speaking so much more than even like a lesson in the classroom. And so that's really, I think, was the idea behind what Jesus was thinking was just because that's how he did it with his disciples. It wasn't just a classroom. And so we can't forget about how our life really is the classroom for those that we're leading, and I think that is huge. So it's amazing that you guys do that. Isn't just here's a service, got things I got to do, but you're doing that extra thing. We're like, let's go walk about a little bit, and let's just kind of like hang out and do those extra things, which I think is so important. For young adults, just have that community. So that's amazing. I love that, and that statistic, man, it's a big one.
It is.
Yeah, because I think you hit it really well of just always keeping that before us of like we want to change that because we do believe we believe that we're following the truth and the truth sets us free, and we want to see people walk in this way. And I think there's a lot of things to it, and I think one of those things is we need more young adult ministries that are undergirding that season of life, because there is a lot of people that do fall away, like you mentioned. And cause I think it was Barna that did that, and then there's even some other ones like I think USA Today, Lifeway Research, others, and they give mixed kind of views depending on the pool of people. But it's the absolute lowest percentage is 66. The absolute highest would be in the 80s. Yeah. And so it was like one of these things where we're in that range there. And so the good news that I also heard in some of the research was that we get 45% of those that did fall away back eventually. There we go. But I think that has to do a lot with young adult ministries. I think it has a lot to do with, people evangelizing other young adults that are evangelizing and shining their light with other peers that are there, and kind of reminds them and those that fell away to come back. And so I think that plus like life changes, and they kind of get into life and they kind of realize, oh man, I really need to, get my life together. And it's because they were brought up in the church or were raised in the church, they kind of feel that hearkening coming back. And so those are all great. But man, if we could change on the front end,
absolutely,
that would be the best. You don't have to go out and sow your wild oats and make all these mistakes just to find out that you had the answer all along.
Exactly.
And I think that's the beautiful part about someone like yours testimony and myself, where we didn't have to go out and go crazy or fall away and do these terrible things or whatever, and then have all these regrets and stuff. It's like we can stand and testify, so like the Lord is that good, and I'm thankful that I was able to press in and stay close to him with that. But I say that so I'm able to talk to my youth students and say, hey, no, he's that good. You don't need to go do that and carry all that stuff. And so I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So going on here, just in our conversation, I want to talk a little bit about what you shared a little bit what God's doing in young adults ministry. Is there anything else that you feel like God's really doing in young adults ministry that you're seeing that are amazing breakthroughs or testimonies or anything like that you'd like to share?
Yeah. One thing we're kind of developing a brand new culture.
Oh, cool.
Just in these last few months of just this kind of fresh vision that God's given me. So I was reading this book. It's called The Anxious Generation. Goes to Church by Tom Rainer. Right? Wow. It's an incredible book. And within that book, I love statistics. I love, because I think it shows us where we're doing great, and it shows us where we need to do a lot of work. And within a portion of that book, it was talking about church growth and ways that churches grow. And one of them was conversion rate, right? We see non-believers come to know Christ, right? The biblical way that the church grows. And they did a study on that to see how many active church members it takes to see one conversion growth in a year.
Okay.
And the statistics were staggering, right? So in 2024, that statistic was 93 to 1. 93 active church members. And the way they did their study is an active church member was considered, they attended once a month, which isn't too far off of a regular, right? I think it's like twice a month and you're considered a regular in church today, which that's a whole nother topic.
That's a whole other topic. For sure.
So we've kind of taken a little step forward. We're at 86 to 1 today in 2026.
Wow.
But just thinking about that, how much more work do we have to go? That it takes 86 people to meet one, right? So what we did, and just praying through that, is God kind of, just gave me this fresh vision for our young adult group specifically. And it's called Find Your One. And it's just kind of becoming our culture, our identity, our DNA, where what we do is we choose one person, right? It's a family member, it's a friend. I'm very clear with them. It's not a ploy to grow our young adult group.
Right.
But what it is just to meet the lost.
That's awesome.
Walking through the parable of the lost sheep. the parable of the lost coin, searching for these people,
Right.
just as Christ would.
Wow.
So yeah, we do. We pick one person, and there's 3 commitments to it that we do, and it's pray for them daily. It's have one spiritual conversation with them a week, and then it's invite them to one thing a month.
Wow.
If they're in that
Yeah.
young adult age
That's
range, I'm like, hey, it's great. Invite them to young adult
Yeah.
study. If not, if it's a family member, meet them for lunch, invite them out for coffee. So we do it every 4 months, and then we choose a new one. So over the course, of a year, we're heavily discipling 3 people, and we're praying for them, and we're lifting them up and having conversations.
Wow.
And this has been 3 to 4 months now in, so we're almost through the first cycle. And not to say that after the 4 months done, we stop with that person,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
We continue through the year and continue to
Right.
walk alongside them
Yeah.
until they're creating disciples, until
Yeah.
they're finding their one.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, and we've just seen so much growth.
Yeah.
And one thing that we focus on heavily is the success is not bringing the number in. The success is having the conversations,
Yeah.
right? The success is praying for them. The success is inviting them out, whether they come or not, right? We're doing it.
Right.
We're doing our part.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been just celebrating,
Yeah.
right? Hearing great opportunities that God's opened, doors that He's opened for our young adults to speak into their friends' lives, their families' lives. So it's been incredible.
Dude, that's amazing. Yeah, because I love the intentionality of it, but keeping things in the right perspective. Right, we could be intentional about things, but we have the wrong perspective.
Yeah.
It can really, kind of take us off track, or we're not really hitting the margins or seeing things happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's really huge there, because you're focusing in I love that. You're like, we're not focusing necessarily on the numbers of what's coming in,
Yep.
but having the conversations, because that's the goal, right? Because it's some are going to water, some are going to plant, and some are going to harvest. And our ministries may not harvest, and they realize they may not do the actual harvesting in that point, but they're planting the seeds.
Yep.
And that's just as much of a win as harvesting or as watering the seed, And I think that because it's all part of that process, and the overall goal is that they would know Jesus at some point in their life, they give their heart to Him, and that they're on their way doing the work of the Lord, and also making more disciples themselves. And so I think, like, for me, I love that you guys keeping the right perspective, where it's not so about just our ministry focus, but it's more about kingdom focus.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that that's so imperative. And I love too the aspect of getting engaged, of doing something outside of just like, well, we're going to do this young adult ministry, but it's like really all going to be self-serving, where it's like we're having a good time, we have the community, and all that stuff's great, and we dive deep in the Word and all that. But like, I really feel like one of the cool caveats of like young adult ministry that's even more free to do than like youth ministry, just because there are young adults, is that you could do outreaches of some kind.
Exactly.
You can do things outside the 4 walls in a way that's way more organic than just like this organized thing with all these permission slips and this and that. You have to make sure of all this thing, and it's like, and those are good. I'm not taking away from like youth group outreaches necessarily, but I'm saying such an organicness to it, where it's just like, hey, we're out here, we're a bunch of Christians, and any trip to Target, to a grocery store, to whatever, can be literally a mission field, because we're going in with this intentionality, anything like that. And I think that that's so cool, because sometimes I feel like as groups, even youth groups, or even young adult groups, it could become self-serving, where it's like all about just kind of creating an ecosystem of like, we're just in this all together, but there's still a mission to be had. Yeah. And there's still a mission that He didn't put an age limit on the Great Commission.
Yep. Exactly.
So it's like, so to me, I think that that's really an amazing aspect, that I know that when I was doing young adult ministry previously, that was something that I saw was really a big spark. It wasn't just like, oh wow, we had food and games, and we had all these great speakers coming in, or this or that, or whatever, we're playing volleyball, but it was more of like the aspect there, whenever we were doing street ministry, and doing street ministry there on the streets in a coffee house, all young adults. There's about 100 of us that were there, and then going out on the streets and like pairs of four, or not pairs of four, but groups of four, and going out and then ministering to people, like meeting homeless people on the streets, prostitutes, gangsters, this and that, and just like, hey, can we pray for you? We're just taking a stroll here on a Sunday evening. Can we pray for you? Oh yeah. And it was just really cool to see that aspect where we had people who were unsaved or just newly saved came out with us. And I remember one time I'm doing a group, but I would lead the group and I would say like, okay, like watch how I do this, watch how I interact with this. And there's nothing scripted here. It's like, it could be really off the wall. I mean, we could have a gun in our face. We could have someone, cussing us out, and we've had all that happen. And so, but watch how I walk with the Holy Spirit and how I move with him. And I want you to see that. And so, and then eventually then I would say, okay, now it's your turn. I got your back. I'm praying for you behind you, but like now it's your turn, but I'm right here, to the point where then they actually start leading their own groups. Yeah. And I think there's just such power in that when we keep the main thing, and obeying the Great Commission of just saying, hey, we need to do that, because I think it brings a lot of life then in the group. Like, we're living for something more than ourselves. Yeah. It's not, we are not the end all, but the end all is really what he's calling us all to do. And I think that's really one of the big aspects of young adult ministry that I don't know as much talked about or whatever, but I think that's such a huge part that, man, you get to really disciple your young adults in, and that they're going to carry for the rest of their life, and will impact generations, because when they raise their kids, and they can start pouring into them from the childhood level of things, and so I think that's a great perspective. Yeah. So we always go through and so part of it is if you have any questions for us or anything like that. Obviously, you're a part of the Ohio Young Adult group that we're putting on an event coming up here in August, 21st, 22nd. Super stoked for that, and just really trying to create a culture. All of us are doing it for the love of it, and just doing it to really see a culture of young adult ministers and ministries together, because we want to see. We believe in this generation, but we also believe in what God's doing in this season of their life, and wanting to change that percentage. We want to change that statistic, and seeing that impact. And I think there needs to be an intentionality behind that, which we're seeing on a national level with the AG, and lots of interviews with Doug Clay and even with Josh Wellborn, and them talking about the intentionality of creating this position, of him taking on that thing on a national level, was a way to kind of start the ripple effect within states. And so we're seeing that. And so do you have anything that you want to share on that level, or questions at all? Or?
Yeah, no, it's going to be a great event, right? Yeah. I'm excited for it, and it's so needed. Yeah. And I think like we've talked about, that young adult age range, it isn't per se forgotten about, right? But maybe not have a specific focused ministry for that. But it's so crucial and so pivotal, right? Because it's the jump between youth ministry and regular attending adults. Yeah. So it's such an important age range that I think is missed so often. Yeah. So I'm blessed, right, to be a part of a network that is, empowering this age group. Yeah. And I'm just excited to see, what God's doing. So. Yeah.
Amen. Yeah. Cause that's really the cool thing, is to see that the backing, the support, people that are cheering it on. And so I think that's really encouraging, I think, and is encouraging to other young adult leaders across the state that may not be able to be part of the inner circle behind like the planning processes and stuff like that. But able to see that, okay, there's stuff that's happening geared towards that. Cause I remember I was talking with, I was on a podcast. We were talking with this guy, Josiah Keenley, and he was talking about these things of where, we're kind of in this Gen 1 or 2 of young adult ministry, because our culture is so shifted from back when a lot of people were maybe in the 70s, right? Or even 80s, early 80s, graduating from high school. They could kind of go get a factory job somewhere, make decent living, have the house, get married and all that, have the kids, all that stuff. And they could really start into that. And there was such a shift within the millennial generation, and even a lot prior to that, maybe even in Gen X, later Gen X, where the shift has started going into more of like, well, those jobs are kind of leaving, but then we need to be going to colleges and getting degrees into there. And so create now this like 4-year thing where it's like you're not full-fledged adult necessarily like you would be back in like the 70s, but you're working your way there, but you have an extra step now, and that extra step also created a whole other like subculture there where like just like a teenager really kind of came really strongly about in the 1950s. There was some aspects in some youth ministry in like the 1920s and 30s, but it really hit hard more so in the 50s. Kids weren't working in factories anymore. There was no war going on in the 50s in that essence, where they were shipped off like in World War II. And so you had a lot of these, youth that were there where they were, it kind of created that culture where they had the cars, they were going to the sock hops and the rock and roll and all those things were going on, and so kind of created this thing called teenager. So because before it was just I'm a kid and then I'm yearning to become just an adult, and kids were growing up a whole lot faster, but now there's this teenager kind of created this block of time where it was normalized to be not full-fledged adult yet, but you still have a little bit gradual responsibilities, and I think that's happened in the last 30 years where we really saw that shift happen then to now, okay, now we got this college age now, and then people are getting adjusted and making all these big decisions a little bit later. So I think with all of that, I think that we're seeing kind of even more culturally the need for this.
Yeah.
And we're kind of more in that Gen 2, Gen 3 maybe, and we were maybe in like Gen 5 of youth ministry, but we're like probably more like Gen 3 of just kind of like developing this thing where it's becoming more and more readily available of having that accessible to people that are in that demographic. Yeah. And so I think it's that thing that's been proven. It's not been a fad or a thing that was here for a season and then we resorted back, but it's like here to stay. And so how do we disciple people going through that season where they're not full-fledged adult, yet they are. And it's like that kind of deal. So I think that's great. Excited for the event. It's going to be awesome. So what we like to do, Garrett, is we like to do kind of like a 5 questions. They're a little more rapid fire, but if you want to elaborate a little more, you feel free. But just some things that are out there for people that are listening that maybe, are curious maybe of just some thoughts of you and what you've experienced. So the first one is books that you are reading now or our favorite book. I know you mentioned one before, a book, but if there's any other books that come to mind.
Yeah. The one I'm reading through right now, it's Spiritual Leadership by J. Oswald Sanders. And it's just, there's just a lot of fruit to it. And there's just a lot of golden nuggets within it just to take in and apply it to leadership. But yeah, the other book from Tom Rainer, it's a really good one. It just starts out talking about why this generation is so anxious. And then it goes a little bit further into like as a church, how we're doing, how we can be better. So the title of the book is The Anxious Generation Goes to Church. Okay. And then the one of the last chapters is The Church Goes to the Anxious Generation. That's awesome. So it kind of flips it on its head. And that book is just absolutely incredible. Wow. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. Yeah, I have to check that out. So second question is, if you could ask us one question today, what would it be?
Yeah, I think a good question that a lot of people struggle with, right? Whether they're in leadership, whether they're not in leadership, that I'd love to pick your brain on a little bit is how do you walk through discouragement in seasons? At a leadership level, right? Because the enemy loves to discourage.
Yes.
So how do you walk through it?
Yeah, and I think discouragement can come in many different forms and fashions and reasons. I think if, sometimes we can get discouraged when we feel like, in ministry, maybe people that we've been pouring into kind of either stop coming out or kind of been MIA for a while. And obviously you try to follow up or they go somewhere else. I think there could be discouragement even from sometimes that we feel from, a lack of support just within the big C church, or any of those kinds of things. So I think in those kinds of discouragements, I would say that we have to keep our eyes on the main thing of saying like, hey, when they're here in front of us, when they're a part of this, I'm here to pour into them, and I am their young adults pastor, I'm their leader, and when they're a part of that, but also know like, they have the freedom to go and wherever God's leading them to go, and as much as we miss them, because we build relationship, we get close, and we can build even a tighter relationship in a way with young adults than we can even with like the youth, because they're also adults too. So you can talk about a lot more things and have a lot more time accessible. And so one thing that I always kind of share with young leaders or with people, and I just say, hey, it's always been a great humbling reminder to me, was I like to grab their hands and say, hey, look at them. I said, I don't see any holes there. And I mean, you didn't die for them,
Yeah.
and they're not yours. You didn't pay the price for them,
Yeah, that's
and
good.
so you don't own them. God does, Jesus does. He builds his church. So a lot of that, it's like, okay, I just need to know the season that I have with them, and the time. Did I steward that well? And that's what I got to keep the focus on. I can't focus on like necessarily growth of the ministry or numbers.
Yeah.
Because that's even something that I really feel. I've heard other good leaders say this, but I don't want to build big crowds. I want to build big people.
Yep.
And I think that's such the heart of God. Because Jesus, I mean, he had 12 guys, and then at the end of everything, there was like over 100 people, I think, in the upper room between him and John the Baptist ministries. John the Baptist being the greatest of the Old Testament, and Jesus obviously the greatest ever. And out of all of them, and Jesus did ministry perfectly, did everything perfectly, loved them perfectly, never messed up once, and still only 100 people after all the thousands that he's fed and healed and this and that. And they're there in the upper room, and so I see that like God wasn't concerned about that. He knew that he could change the world with that group as long as those people were big people and that they understand who they were in him, and with them having the Holy Spirit filled within them, they were able to change the world, as we see, as why we're sitting here now talking. So I think a lot of that helps a lot in that way, but other discouragement in life and other things where it seems like stuff is happening where either you feel attacked, you feel like the heavens are brass, so to speak, like just things aren't really happening in those seasons. Sometimes what's really gotten with me was, I've been like on a sabbatical, which was really helpful. And every 7 years, usually I recommend, and I know others that recommend to go on a sabbatical. But there's a book it's called The Emotionally Healthy Leader by Peter Scorsese. And he does a really great job within like searching in within yourself and what's kind of going on, because maybe there's some things that you got disconnected or that you're lacking or weren't doing your own personal maintenance. So it's kind of like almost like a check engine light where, okay, I got to change the oil. Okay, I got to do the maintenance, and maybe I wasn't doing that, or, I kind of ran out on that. So I need to kind of go to the proper mechanic and deal with it. And other times it's God drawing us to seek out him in a way where he's drawing us in a way this is going to be a little bit different. Like, okay, I need to go on a fast, or I need to, feel led to do something differently. And so there's some of those things where I feel like in that way you could feel discouragement, but it's actually meant to draw you in a different way closer to Jesus and rely on him through it and see it on the other side. And I think so it really depends on the case of, I guess, where discouragement is coming from. But those are the things that I would say, top of my mind, of different types of discouragement and how maybe you could walk through that.
That's good.
And then, the last thing I'll add to it is just that you're not alone. And so there's people that want to talk with you, help you, just be a brother or sister in the moment, and being that where don't be afraid to talk with. That's one of the things why we do these events, is that other young adult leaders can meet other young adult leaders in a way, just like when us youth pastors, we meet everybody at Reach, or now it's the youth conference. It's like when we meet there and we get to talk, and we have that little room where we can kind of like have those things and share things of what we're dealing with, what we're seeing. And it's good to have those conversations, that brotherhood, where we're able to talk about that. And I think that's really big too, like having not only a good mentor, but also like a really good, like just good brotherhood. Yeah. You could be open with, honest about things that will be there to encourage you. And so, because sometimes when we silo ourselves, or we feel like we're forced to be siloed, that's a great form of discouragement that can come. And so I think that's really a big deal with that. I hope that answers your question. Yeah. And so the third one is best advice you've ever been given.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I don't even know who said this to me, but it's just stuck with me.
Yeah.
But it's just be faithful and let God take care of the results. We alluded to it earlier, but sometimes we can kind of put it on ourselves, but we're really just the ones planting the seed and watering the seed, right? God's the one that's making it grow. And it's just stuck with me. Because, awesome. Especially at a leadership level, sometimes we can put the results on ourselves and we can feel that pressure.
So true.
But it's just simply being obedient, right? Giving him our yes, whether it makes sense or not, right? Being obedient to his voice and letting him take care of the rest.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Great advice. And then the other one, question 4 is, if you could tell your 18-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
Yeah, this isn't even that long ago, right? So this is 5 years ago at this point. But I would tell myself, kill the pride in your heart.
That's good.
I think a lot of people, everybody struggles with pride,
Yes.
right? Pride can creep in. We actually just finished a whole sermon series in our youth group about pride.
Oh, awesome.
Just the danger of it.
Yeah.
And you know, I think early in ministry, I really struggled with pride to the point of if there wasn't enough students in the room, I would switch off. And I would be like, this isn't a successful night because there's not enough students, and I would just switch off. And obviously I saw that hurting the ministry, hurting the students.
Sure.
So it's something I had to learn so early in ministry, but I wish I learned it prior to ministry.
Sure.
Of just killing that pride, because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's very dangerous. Yeah. It's literally the root of like all sin is that pride of, I'm going to live life how I want to live it.
Yeah.
And don't you tell me, how to live my life in that sense. This is the root of that. And so that's great. No, it's great advice. Number 5 is, if you could leave the listeners with one piece of encouragement today, what would it be?
Yeah, so kind of going back to like the find your one aspect of things. I was looking at some statistics, as I was presenting this to my young adult group, and it just really stood out to me how many people are willing to talk about spirituality, right? So the Barnum Group said that 74% of Americans are interested in growing spiritually. Right? So 74%, that's a lot. Wow. That's a lot higher than I thought it would be, and I expected it to be. And then anywhere from 50 to 60% of Americans would be willing to accept an invite to church.
Yeah. Wow.
From a family or a friend. So those are 2 statistics that I shared with my young adult group, and it's encouraging. Yeah. And I hope it's encouraging to us and for the listeners, just to get out there and evangelize, right? Because people are hungry, and whether people know it or not, right? They're searching for truth, and they might just be looking in the wrong place.
That's very true. That's great, man. Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Garret, for coming in, man. It's been a pleasure, and looking forward to the events that we're going to be doing together coming up here in August, and then and we'll be doing some other stuff and all of that. But man, look forward to you have to come in again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do another pod episode. Awesome. Well, hey, so thank you guys so much for joining us. We appreciate you guys, and stay tuned for more episodes as we keep recording.